Hong Kong residents rushed in the early hours of this morning to snap up copies of the final edition of Apple Daily. The pro-democracy newspaper was forced to close after 26 years when it became the target of a national security law. Flora Bradley-Watson brings us this report.
Hundreds of Hong Kongers queued up on Thursday morning to buy the last edition of Apple Daily. The pro-democracy newspaper has been forced to close after 26 years after becoming the target of a national security crackdown. In anticipation of the demand, Apple Daily printed 1 million copies, more than 10 times its usual print run. Supporters lamented the most serious blow yet to Hong Kong's media freedoms.
I think it's the end of an era, so I want to come out and buy a copy. Also, I don't understand why Hong Kong can't even tolerate a newspaper.
Although sometimes I don't agree with what the papers wrote, a society should have a variety of voices. We can't eliminate those voices just because of certain reasons.
Hundreds of supporters gathered outside the offices of the newspaper on Wednesday night and waved smartphone lights. The last front page of Apple Daily carried a photograph of them and a member of staff waving back with the headline, "Hong Kongers bid a painful farewell in the rain." Inside the newsroom, there were cheers and some tears as the final edition went to press. Apple Daily has faced an unrelenting squeeze since its owner and staunch Beijing critic, Jimmy Lai, was arrested under the national security law last August. Police last week froze assets of companies linked to the newspaper, raided the paper's headquarters, and arrested 5 executives. Scenes of hundreds of police in the newsroom, rooting through journalistic materials, drew international condemnation. Authorities have said dozens of Apple Daily pieces may have violated the national security law. Since the raid, the newspaper says it has suffered mass resignations and entire departments have had to close. The UK said the closure of the paper was a, quote, chilling demonstration of Hong Kong's campaign to silence all opposition voices.
An exiled Hong Kong activist who fled to the UK says he's saddened by the closure of Apple Daily. Nathan Law says the Chinese regime is using legal means to silence Hong Kong. NTD's Rhodes has more.
A Hong Kong activist leader now based in the UK condemns the closure of pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily. Nathan Law says he's saddened and disheartened by the news and it's a violation of Hong Kong's freedoms.
The Chinese government is transplanting the Chinese way of governance in Hong Kong, which they, despite ideas of division of power and centralize all power. And that's why they are doing something like that to Apple Daily, because they don't want any newspaper to be holding them accountable.
The Chinese regime imposed a strict national security law in Hong Kong last year. The law was used in the arrest of the newspaper's bosses and employees. Beijing also revamped Hong Kong's election laws to keep opposition voices out.
The government could use the name of national security to prosecute them under the national security law to basically achieve anything. And I think that makes Hong Kong into such a strange place and just an ordinary city that many of Hong Kong people do not recognize.
26-year-old Law rose to prominence in Hong Kong as one of the student leaders of the pro-democracy umbrella revolution in 2014. When the new security law was imposed last year, he left Hong Kong and was granted asylum in the UK. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
Boris Johnson! Boycott Beijing! Free Hong Kong!
As the forced closure of Hong Kong's largest pro-democracy newspaper casts a darker shadow on freedoms in Hong Kong, calls to boycott the Beijing Winter Olympics grow stronger.
We've all seen just this week the dismantling of democracy in Hong Kong. With this background, to send athletes to the Games will only endorse the Chinese Communist Party and their repression. And it's time our government and governments around the world stood up to the Chinese Communist Party and said they're going to boycott Beijing 2022.
Human rights campaigners from different communities came together to call for a boycott of the Games.
No to the Beijing 22 Winter Olympics.
China is accused of human rights atrocities, including forced organ harvesting from Falun Gong practitioners and a genocide against the Uyghur ethnicity. So we're here opposite Downing Street and we asked the people at this protest what a boycott of the Beijing Olympics would actually look like.
I personally don't call on the athletes to boycott the Games, but I do call on them to examine their consciences and to think about what their response to the Games should be. I understand they will have trained for a long time, and it's a hard thing to ask them not to participate, but I would ask them whether they're comfortable with their consciences in participating.
If we got, say, more than 10 democratic countries join hands to withdraw the national team, this will create a strong image or strong voices against the CCP and put immense pressure on the IOC, and this is the only way that we could move the Games from Beijing to other places.
What I think is more feasible is to brand the Games as the genocide Games so that it causes huge embarrassment to China's image.
We saw what happened in 2008 where Beijing hosted the Summer Olympics. They said they'd improve human rights, and we've only seen more repression, more torture, more crushing of democracy, more people's organs harvest, and now a new genocide happening to the Uyghur people. So it doesn't matter what that boycott looks like, it's got to happen, and it's got to happen soon.
The government has said it's not normally in favour of sporting boycotts. The Foreign Office didn't respond in time for deadline.
No freedom!
In the coming months, calls for a boycott will likely only get louder. Jane Warrell, NTD News, London.
1/3 of the sponsors for this year's European Football Championships are Chinese companies, making China the largest financier of the event. This has caused concerns in Europe. 4 major Chinese companies, including Hisense, Alipay, Vivo and TikTok, are among the 12 sponsors of the Euro Cup. The sponsorship helps Chinese companies gain visibility on an international stage. Chinese state-run media considers it a political win for China. But corporate sponsorships coming from authoritarian states are what concerns Europe. Volkswagen is the only European company among the sponsors. Swiss media reported that European values are not represented in the event by the sponsoring companies. And in other news, there won't be any alcohol sold at the Tokyo Olympics. On Wednesday, organisers made the decision while defending plans to allow thousands of spectators.
With just 30 days to go until the Olympics, organisers in Tokyo decided on Wednesday to ban the sale of alcohol at venues. Tokyo Olympics president Seiko Hashimoto told reporters that the measure would prevent the spread of the coronavirus, adding that Japanese drinks company and sponsor, Asahi Breweries, had backed the decision. Media reports that organisers were considering allowing alcohol consumption in Olympic venues provoked a public outcry earlier this week. Hashimoto acknowledged that unease.
As the organising committee wants to hold the Games in a safe and secure manner, it's our responsibility to make it happen. So if our citizens have concerns over serving alcohol at the Olympics, I think we have to give up on that. That's why we have decided to ban the sale of alcohol.
She also defended the decision to allow up to 10,000 domestic spectators into venues. Hashimoto said that measure is in line with recommendations from medical experts. However, many Japanese remain sceptical that even a scaled-back Games will be safe or secure. Those concerns only rose after a member of the Ugandan delegation who arrived in Japan on the weekend tested positive for the coronavirus. That's despite having been vaccinated and testing negative for COVID-19 before arrival. The arduous preparations for the Olympics appear to have also taken their toll on organisers. Tokyo Governor Yuriko Koike was hospitalised on Tuesday after the metropolitan government said she would take the rest of the week off due to fatigue.
And finally, a London aquarium welcomes 2 baby penguins. They are the only Gen 2 penguins born in England this year. The first chick started to break through its egg in May, and the other followed soon after. It follows a successful breeding season during lockdown. That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Lees. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.